Hello, I'm the Miami Autism Dad, Victor Antunez, inclusive my Realtor, and this is the Autism Podcast at Miami's Community Spares. Today, I have the great pleasure of interviewing the Area Executive Director of Autism Speaks Florida, Candi Spitz. Candi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Victor.
Candi, you're not originally from Florida, from New York. You moved down here with your twin autistic boys. For families like ours, these kind of moves usually aren't about the weather. So what brought you down to South Florida?
Actually, I'm originally from Ohio, but I lived in New York with my ex-husband. Autism, honestly, is what brought us down. So my kids were born and raised in New York. They were age 2 when they were officially diagnosed. But it was at that point in time when I really realized that not having like an entire village, a community behind you, rocks you to your core. I mean, I would spend, when the kids were newly diagnosed, I would spend 8+ hours a day staring at the same 4 walls with therapists coming in and out, ABA and speech and OT and play therapy and music therapy. I hit a point where this can't be all there is to life. There has to be more. I have to get out of these 4 walls. I need a village. Mm-hmm. So we moved back to South Florida. We had been kind of snowbird residents here for a long time, but we had friends and family and a support system. And Autism Speaks actually is the one who orchestrated my move down here and brought me into the autism community here in South Florida.
So this village, was it people in the autism world or both?
Both. So at that time, no. So my late mother-in-law lived down here. My ex-brother-in-law lived down here. Mm-hmm. Most of our friend circle was here. Mm-hmm. But really, it was just a sense of community that we had when we were here before. And when the boys were newly diagnosed, they were regressed when they were 17 months old. One of the first calls that I made was to Autism Speaks. There was no clear answer that it was autism at the time. You couldn't be diagnosed until age 2. So in the middle of the night when you're just lost and confused and Googling of like no eye contact and all of the symptoms that you know so well, the one word that kept popping up over and over and over again was autism. I didn't really know where to turn. There wasn't a lot said about this in 2009. So I found Autism Speaks website, called them in the middle of the night, and basically just left a message of like, here is who we are. Here's who my husband is. Here who I am. My kids were at the time big child and TV movie stars working in the city. Here's who we are. I think my kids have autism. Like, somebody help me. And left this generic message. In fact, we were just talking about this the other day. The person who made that phone call back to me the next morning, former vice president of Autism Speaks, Kathy Kanefsky, and she said she still remembers that call to this day. Next morning, calls me at 9 o'clock in the morning and basically held my hand from the diagnosis and living in New York down to giving me a sense of community down here, introducing me to CARD, introducing me to Autism Speaks Florida, introducing me to everyone that I really needed to know to feel supported here in South Florida.
You know, you're really lucky you had that hand holding, because I think a lot of parents, they get the diagnosis and they don't have anyone. And even in places like Miami where there are a ton of autism services, if you're not already in the world, you might just feel like you don't know where to go.
Yeah.
So what would you, if you had the diagnosis today, a parent, and they didn't know anyone, how would you go about finding these services?
That's the hardest part. And that was the scary part for me. So I went through a dual diagnosis. We had to get diagnosed in New York, and then you come to Florida and you have to get diagnosed all over again. And the scariest moment was after the word autism is written down, you're given a book, that's like this thick. At least that was 2009. And it would say like Victor, Coral Springs, and a phone number. And I'm like, speech pathologist, like I'm supposed to pick my therapist because I like your name and where you live. Like there was no guidance, there was no support. And I started watching this pattern as I got into a school for autism and all of these things at age 3 of there's no one telling you. Like the one thing I needed to know at that point in time was that everything was going to be okay. Just give me a glimmer of hope that there is a next step. This is not what our life is going to look like. And there was nobody to do that. Within those first couple of years that I was down here, Autism Speaks came out with a 100-day toolkit. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Very nice toolkit.
Yes, thank you.
I
But I'm like, for me, that is what I still to this day push to everyone. Yes. Whether or not
it's a good start.
Yeah, wherever you are on the spectrum, or on this journey, I should say, not the spectrum, because it is. It's kind of like a roadmap of where to go. Because regardless of your situation, whether it's your financial situation, your home situation, or what you're going through, when you get that diagnosis, it rocks you to the core.
Yes, it does. It's scary.
Yeah, you can't process what life is supposed to look like. Our babies are born and you're expecting you're going to have this perfect child and this is the vision I have for their future. Nobody prepares you for this. And even if you go through, like for us, there was about a 3-month window when we were starting the diagnosis process at 17 months until they were officially diagnosed. Something about that official word just hit hard. And you lose.
But it's also helpful.
It is. What is.
Now you know where to go,
right.
what direction to aim in.
Yeah. But for me, it was I think you lose all common sense at that point is kind of where I'm at. Because it's like, you might be a really rational thinker on a normal day, but you forget like what the next step is. Like you forget to breathe. You're like, I need to get up. I need to eat. I need to do this. So that 100-day toolkit really walks you through that. And for me, gave me the confidence of, I can do this. Mm-hmm. There is a plan. There are people that are going to help. And I can make my kids be the best version of themselves that they can be if I just stick to this plan. And that's kind of where I've shaped the last now 16 and plus years of the diagnosis.
I didn't have that toolkit when my daughter was diagnosed. What I did have was my sister-in-law. She works at the public schools.
Oh, okay.
In this world. Mm-hmm. She's like, you got to go to Fiddler's and get an evaluation. Then you got to go to APD website and apply for this. Mm-hmm. So she gave me a roadmap, which was super, super helpful. So before this is over, we'll talk about that toolkit and how to get a hold of it. Because people, it's a great help to have that. Yeah. Now let's talk about the regression. Your kids had a regression at 17 and a half months.
Correct.
My daughter had hers around 2.
Okay.
And it was very marked. She's very neurotypical, and then her behavior just changed. Mm-hmm. But my wife and I, we were first-time parents, so we just thought, oh, how cute, because you don't really know, because you're first-time parents. And at that age, everything's very cute.
Right.
Especially my mother-in-law, she's like, look, you know what? You guys got to wake up. Something wrong with your daughter. Have her checked. And I was like, the slap in the face, like, yeah, you know what? It is cute, but it's also very odd. And then we had the evaluation and the diagnosis. And the night driving home from the diagnosis that we had, my wife's like, stop the car, I can't breathe, started hyperventilating. Me, I was very stoic about it. But it's scary because, when you hear about autism, what you normally see is the worst case scenarios. Because the good case scenarios don't make the news.
Right.
And then it's just so overwhelming and scary. So I would tell parents that are going through the regression is that err on the side of caution. If you see this marked behavior change around 2 or whatever age may be, because every kid's different, have them looked at, because it's better to know than to not know.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is you have twin boys and they're both autistic. I have a friend, he's got twin boys also. One is on the spectrum, one is not. How common is that?
So it's very common for both sides of that.
Okay.
So my twins are actually the rarest version of a twin that there is. So they're identical twins, but they're also mirror image twins, meaning that I was originally only pregnant with one child, and around 9.5, I think it was 9.5 weeks or so, they split into 2.
That's amazing.
So my first initial ultrasound was one perfect baby. My ex-husband was a musician, and he was leaving to go on tour. So we had the ultrasound, perfect baby, perfect heartbeat, perfect everything. We were prepared for this. He leaves, comes back a few months later. We did not know that they had split into 2 babies. So he comes back, and we go in for the next ultrasound. We're so excited to see, the babies have grown. All of a sudden, the doctors are walking out of the room. They leave us alone for almost 45 minutes. I am in a panic state, as any new mom would be. This is my first child, and cancer runs in my family. I'm thinking every worst case scenario. Why aren't they coming back in here? And it wasn't my typical ultrasound tech. The person who walked in and was like, you're having twins, right?
That's one way to break the news.
I flatlined, because you're on the heart monitors. I flatlined on the table. I had been having these visions for about a month prior about twins.
Interesting.
And we always used to joke afterwards, because we would go to the same restaurant after every doctor's appointment, and I put the ultrasound in front of us, and we didn't speak for like an hour and a half, and we would just stare at the picture of the 2 bubbles. But why that's so interesting is the 2 complete each other. So they're one child who split into 2. One's a righty, one's a lefty. One was verbal, one was nonverbal. One was social, one was antisocial. One needed spinning, one needed deep pressure. Everything about them completes each other.
Wow.
But their autism, I said, is very unique. And it's been a journey to watch that happen. But going back to what you said with your wife, we didn't talk about this earlier. That was really interesting that your wife had that reaction. my ex-husband had a heart attack the day of the diagnosis.
Oh my goodness.
And we didn't know what happened. We were at the pediatrician, and he had been having some health-related problems leading into that. He thought it was asthma. And that day, he asked our doctor, I said, can you listen to he was like, can you take a listen to my lungs? Like, he's like, I'm having some trouble breathing. They had just, it was one of our closest friends was our pediatrician. He had just written down the diagnosis. I am trying to process this diagnosis. And Dr. Habart looked at me and said, Candi, we're still in New York. You're going to take him to Vassar Hospital right now. You're not going to ask any questions. And in 20 minutes, I'm going to call you and make sure that you're there. What he didn't tell me was that he had had a heart attack. And he could hear, I don't know what the sound, there's a sound that the heart makes that let him know that there was something wrong, that there was a blockage, that there was whatever. And we get to the hospital, and he's arguing with me of like, I'm not going into the hospital. Like, we don't have time for this, all these other rationally things. And I'm like, so you want my kid's got a diagnosis of autism today, and I'm going to lose my husband in the same day. Like, I can't take much more.
A little too much to process.
You're going into the hospital. But yeah, it was, that's that initial, and it not related to the autism diagnosis, but just happened to be that same day of everything happening was just a whirlwind.
What a coincidence. That's amazing. Now, let's go ahead and use this to segue into men's reactions. I'm in a dad's group, and these are dads who have, for whatever reason, decided to stay. But there are dads who either physically or emotionally check out. I think you went through this with your husband. And I don't want to be calling men out. I want to call them up because it's tough. And it's even tougher for the moms.
It is.
It's actually my sister who kind of like, she gave me like the slap in the face. My wife and I were going through a rough spot. And I was probably being selfish. Who knows? I don't really remember. But she's like, look, you need to realize that being a mom is super tough because of this, and this. And I was like, reflecting, I was like, yeah, my wife really does like the heavy lifting. Yeah. And so my sister telling me that made me really appreciate what my wife is going through. And fortunately, I'm around a lot of other dads that call me up as well. But some men, they check out. So how would, after having gone through this with your husband checking out and divorce, if you had a newly diagnosed couple and you see the man's like wavering, what would you say to that man to keep him like in the fight?
I love that you're doing this for the dads for that exact reason. People always look at the moms of this is a 24/7, and moms are we're just in tune. We just do it. We just jump in, and it's not to say that there aren't dads who do take on the main like parental caregiver role in this, but it's typically the moms.
Yes.
And in my scenario, just like you said, it was more the emotional checking out. It wasn't physically checking out, but he wasn't there. He wasn't there to support me. He wasn't there to support his children. He wasn't engaging in their therapies. He wasn't a part of this. And I just finally hit a point where if you're just an extra body in the house, why do I need you here? This is more work. Where he could have easily, I shouldn't say easily. I mean, this is a hard adjustment for everyone.
Nothing's easy.
But
it's
he
doable.
He could have been a part. And I wish, not for our sake, but for other families going through that, we would have had those conversations, because especially in the beginning, this is a hard road. And it really takes two of you to balance each other out, because the primary caregiver parent is trying to stay so positive all day long, never showing emotion. I was smiling, laughing through everything, not a care in the world as far as the general population could see or that my kids could see. I didn't want them to see the stress or how hurt I was or how scared I was. And then they would go to sleep at night and I would break down, I would cry, and there was nobody to support me. He might have been doing the same thing, but we didn't communicate it together. And so when you're starting this, especially for those new parents going through the diagnosis, watch out for each other. Watch for those little moments.
Well, like what? Give me some concrete examples.
If you see that your wife's behavior is off, do you see maybe she's just staying in the shower a little bit longer, because the shower is where I used to cry. If she's staying in the shower a little bit longer than she was before, is she going outside and sitting in the car? Is she taking those moments that she never would have done that before? Ask her if something's wrong, because maybe she doesn't want to show it. Maybe she doesn't want to scare you. Maybe she doesn't want. Maybe she's just overwhelmed with everything. And same for the wife with the husband. Watch for those signs. Is he staying in the office a little bit longer? Is he avoiding coming in? Is he not communicating, with the teachers, the therapists? Is he not interacting? Is he not engaging? Is he not trying to be a part of this? Find ways to pull each other in, because honestly, that will save your marriage. It's a hard road to do for two. It's an even harder road to do for one person. Yes. And, you know, the love is there on both sides, but this is a tough journey. And you have to be open to, you know, you and I were having a private conversation about this with my situation. Our kids understand so much more than we realize. So whether or not it's mom isn't speaking to the child, dad isn't speaking to the child because they're nonverbal. They think that they're not understanding. Mom and dad aren't speaking to each other. Mom and dad are fighting. There's money problems, there's household problems, there's stress. Your child is so intuitive. They are picking up on all of this. You have to just navigate this road where you and I are talking together as husband and wife of how do we navigate this road? Finding the joys in the little moments of every day, trying to keep normalcy there, and remembering at the core, maybe they're nonverbal at this point in time, but every single thing that you're saying and doing is going in and absorbing. And one day, and luckily I've lived through all of this, it's going to come out. And it's beautiful when it does, but it's also heartbreaking if you miss those moments.
Yeah, I was always told that you should assume competency in the sense that the kids, they might not register it the way that we do, mm-hmm. or a normal kid their age does, but something is being registered. And just assume that it's 100%.
Yes.
Although it might be 20%, you never
mm-hmm.
know. Now, you had spoken in a previous podcast about divorce rates.
Yes. Being
much higher amongst the parents of special needs children. Mm-hmm. What is that rate?
It's over 90% now.
Really?
I don't know the exact number, and it's all special needs, not just autism.
Right.
Because
it could be Down syndrome, could be.
This is a hard road. You know
yes.
this. And, I said there's financial strain. There's all of these other things that go into this that it finally just leads to divorce. But the prevalence is so high. I mean, we're talking 1 in 31 children now. I can only imagine what the divorce rates are currently based on that. When there's things that we can do. There's support groups. There's all of these things that we can do to kind of build the family dynamic and work together so we don't have to get to that stage if we're willing to have a conversation.
Yeah. And like I say, I'm in an autism dads group, mm-hmm. and we don't meet enough. I wish we met more, because when I go there, it's just like such a cleansing. It's really nice to be around these guys. And I would also say this to dads is that I think some men, it's immaturity in the sense that they have this illusion, like I can, if I leave my wife and this family, I'll go find some perfect something. It's like you're deluding yourself, because you married this person for a reason. You chose to have these kids, and you're not going to find a better deal.
Right.
This is the deal you got, and it might not be the one you thought you were going to get, but it's not terrible either.
Right.
I mean, it could be worse. And although I got to admit also that my daughter, as far as being on the spectrum, she's easy. I know some parents are going through really difficult times. So what would you say to those parents?
Well, that's the hard part. And you also don't know, this is a spectrum.
Yes.
And you don't know how they're going to evolve over time. So I went from my kids having the perfect, typical babies to regressing and losing every skill. I mean, there was a point in time, and I openly say this, there's a point in time about 9 months when they were first diagnosed. I can't even look at those pictures to this day, and they're 18 years old, where they lost the light in them. They just looked blank, and it breaks my heart when I see those pictures come up, because they lost who they were. Mm-hmm. That's not who they are now at 18. So you never know, what's going to change. We talked about the fact that, at age 7, my kids were not speaking at all, completely nonverbal. And in the middle of the night, in the middle of giving our nighttime kissing routine, like I would give them 3 kisses and say, "Good night, sweet dreams, mommy loves you." Blank stares, went through this same routine every night of their life. I leaned down, kissed Brendan, and said, "Good night." And he looked up at me and said, "Sweet dreams, mommy loves you." Had never spoken a word. You never know when the stuff is going to come, mm-hmm. and when it's going to change and how they're going to adapt. I have watched now my kids go to a special school for autism in Palm Beach County. They go to special camps for autism. I give them every experience, possible. But I'm a single mom, and I have been for 10 years. They have to go everywhere with me. I travel all the time. I'm everywhere from in government meetings in Tallahassee to a TV show with NBC to working now at Autism Speaks. They have learned to navigate all of those roles. So we went from meltdown behaviors where it took 3 and 4 people to hold my child down to do a diaper change, to, if you follow me on social media, we travel every single day of the week, just the 3 of us, and happy as can be. You know, they will always go to a special school. They will always need supports. I envision that they will always live at home, and something I try to have conversations about now with them, but you can't tell. But the progress is amazing. Our life is amazing. It has challenges. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but our life is amazing, and they're so full of love and so full of all of these things. You don't know, you know, the child who I used to have 10 to 13, no joke, locks on my doors. I have photos where my door frames were lined because I didn't want my children to get out at night. To now, again, it's the 3 of us traveling the world all the time. You never know what's next.
When you speak about schools, special schools, is it a special high school or a special school for adults with autism?
So my kids go to the Palm Beach School for Autism, which goes from age 3 to age 22. So they have been in the same program. This was our 15th year we just completed, from pre-K through elementary, middle, high school. We just graduated about 3 weeks ago. They graduated from high school, deferred the diploma so they can stay in the district. And now they enter at the same school. It's called Project Next. And it is the 18 to 22 job, like work study program. There's no more educational component. They work on life skills and they work in the community. And there's other programs like this. This isn't the only one in South Florida. But for my kids, it's been amazing. Like they walk in every day as I always call the quote unquote mayor of the school. They know every person, they know every child, they know everything about that child. They know the patterns, you know, they know backpacks that the child had 15 years ago, they can still tell you to this day. That they're so excited to start this next process of the work program. Because in high school, they were able to work in the community 2 days a week. With the new program, they'll be working 4 days a week, plus a field experience day every month. So there's incredible opportunities here in South Florida, but you need to be a part of our community to know where those are.
You do. And what kind of work are they doing?
So right now, Jaden works at the soup kitchen, so volunteering. Brendan's in Burlington. That was the last 9 months. And then the next program, starting with Project Next, I have no voice today, I'm so sorry. But the next program, Brendan, I believe, will be working at Duffy's Sports Grill. And
oh, nice. So it'd be a paid position then?
Yeah, it can. Well, it'll go into one. So while they're still in school, it is through the school, and then they can be hired. And I'm not sure where Brendan's going to be working, or Jaden's going to be working, but they have 4 or 5 different programs, from golf clubs to there's a country club, Publix, Duffy's, Burlington. Trying to think where else. The Hyatt. There's a few hotel chains, and they have a company called 8480, which is a gift box company that operates out of the school.
Maybe you have a registry. These employers that are employing these special needs kids, is there like a list that you can go find them?
I wish. I wish. There's a lot of resources you can reach out to, and we can go into the resources with Autism Speaks at the very end.
Okay.
But through our art program, our autism response team, any kind of questions like this, you can always call our art line, whether it's you're looking for opportunities, whether it be for jobs, doctors, etc. Reach out to them. They can try to connect you. A big part of what we do at Autism Speaks is the Workforce Inclusion Now program, the WIN program. So we're training those companies in our communities on hiring practices for those with autism, how to be a good coworker for those with autism, how to be there to support your customers with autism. So we have those introductions. So reach out to our team and we can help connect you.
Do you think that there are enough jobs out there for the kids, or still lacking?
I think it's still lacking, but that's a big part of what Workforce Inclusion Now is there for. Most of the problems with the companies that are out there, their HR practices are not conducive to our children, our young adults.
The interview process.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. My kids cannot go through an interview process. I mean, we just did something very similar with crisis intervention training for law enforcement. And officers who know my kids very well sat them down, recorded to do this video, this training video of, did you break into the house? Yes. Did you steal the car? Yes. Did you drive fast? Yes. Like they went through the whole scenario of something they've never done, because their answer to anything is going to be yes or good. Same thing with reading Miranda rights. They just repeated everything you said. Same thing happens in a job interview. So our team at Autism Speaks has a group that goes in and trains the hiring process, the hiring managers, how to go through an interview with our young adults, how to be a better coworker, how to be supportive of your customer base. As this continues to grow, and it really is taking off, especially here in South Florida. Miami-Dade is phenomenal with the programs that are down here. There's going to be more opportunities.
Well, because you spoke about the prevalence being 1 in 31. I think I read a CDC report being 1 in 22. Yeah, it's
I haven't even seen that.
Yeah, it came out in 22, so it's already old. So the number might be even higher.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people really realize that this is kind of like an economic ticking time bomb, because as these kids age out of the school system at 22, that's it, they're out, they're adults. If they're not employable, and many of them are employable if they get the training at a younger age, because it takes time to reinforce all this training. And I don't think that people realize that either we can get them employed, they take care of themselves, or we're taking care of them.
Right.
Because either way, they got to live.
Right.
And so what kind of outreach can we do to these? I don't know if it's who would we blame? I mean, the employers.
You know what? It's the community. I shouldn't even say it. It's society as a whole. But you and I were talking about this. That's actually the reason I came to Autism Speaks now when I did. I mean, I've been involved for 16 years, but I came on as executive director 7 months ago, because the whole focus of the organization right now is on that transition to adulthood. We will always be there as an organization to support the newly diagnosed in that whole process. But there's a million organizations that are there to take care of that.
For the little ones.
Right. But what happens? I mean, I'm going through this right now. We were saying that, like, in 1 week's time period, I went through a graduation, turning 18, and having to go through guardianship hearings with my kids. It was in 5 days. Let me tell you, I was an emotional mess, because that's a lot to go through. And you don't realize, just how much this transition to adulthood retakes out of the parent. Everything that I went through, when they were 2 and going through the diagnosis, I think came back up emotionally in the last month and a half. You are faced with things like guardianship. You are faced with having to write down on paper, and even though we only did guardianship advocacy, which still gives them the right to vote, you have to say, my child will never drive a car. My child will never marry. You as the parent have to take away those rights. It's not the court. And say, like, they won't sign a contract. They can't travel. They can't. I had an emotional breakdown and called my attorney, like, I cannot sign this form. I can't do it. She said, Candi, the court loves to give them back their rights.
Really?
Yeah, the court loves. It's easy. It's actually harder to take away all of this. But say, like, again, Autism Speaks, we have a program for driver's ed. It's a brand new program just starting across the country. Who's to say that, yes, right now at 18, my kids cannot, because they have no sense of danger, they have, spatial awareness, those kind of things. 10 years from now, they might be able to drive a car. It's a simple form that you file with the court saying, I want them to have their rights back to be able to drive a car. And the court says yes. Like, the court wants to give them back their rights.
That's amazing.
But there's so many of these transitional things that happen 18 to 22. And then at 22, you're just left in the dark. I mean, you don't have a school. You don't have job programs. There's very few residential places.
Yes, not enough. Not enough.
We're all aging. I mean, I hate to admit that, but we're all aging. So we always have that fear of what happens when we're gone. Who's there to protect? So that was when I noticed that Autism Speaks, really the transition to adulthood is the big focus, which is why you were at our summit, like why we did the summit, why we brought in so many resources from right here in Miami-Dade of what the community is doing, from post-secondary options to travel and tourism, to the workforce programs, to, medical programs. When you realize, like, we all need to come together and start now. Like, your daughter is 8, so you still have a few years, but it goes fast.
I know.
It goes.
Well, the first 5 went by fast.
It goes really fast. We have to have those plans in place. But I think as a society, we're all starting to have those conversations now of what happens next and what can we do to come together and work together to make sure they can have gainful, meaningful employment. Our children are brilliant. Whether or not they're verbal, nonverbal, using, PEC systems to talk or however they're communicating, they're brilliant. They're able to stay on task. They're able to do things that most employers, they're dream employees for most employers.
Yeah, sure.
If you figure out how to, integrate them into your system. There's post-secondary options, especially here in Miami. I am blown away by the options down here when it comes to post-secondary. There's opportunities for our kids. But again, you need to know where to go to find it. You need to have these parent groups. You need to have your dad's groups where you're having these conversations of like, hey, did you know this existed? I'm the executive director of Autism Speaks Florida, and I have no idea of half the programs because so many new things are happening every day that it's a full-time job just to keep up with opportunities, which is a great, great, great thing for us as parents.
It's a great problem to have. You have a lot of resources in South Florida for our kids. Now, I got the 2-minute warning 2 minutes ago, but I want to ask you 5 last questions, rapid fire, before we close the show. Okay, so the first question is, what's one Autism Speaks initiative every Florida parent should know about, but probably doesn't?
Ooh, the ART programs are our autism response team. Anyone can call 188-AUTISM-2 if you have a question anywhere in the United States, but really here in Florida, of where to go for a doctor, therapy, services, need support, need a grant, you're struggling financially, whatever it is, 188-AUTISM-2.
Number 2, if a parent gets a new diagnosis today, where should they go first on the Autism Speaks website?
Just go to autismspeaks.org and go into resources, and there's a 100-day toolkit.
Which I highly recommend. Great toolkit. Yeah. And you also have another for 100 days for older kids?
Yeah, there's a resource for everything on that
Every
website.
Age. Great. Okay. Third question. What's the biggest misunderstanding people still have about Autism Speaks?
Oh, there are so many misconceptions. In fact, you can go to the website and read a bunch of them. But especially here in South Florida, just knowing that we are all working together, whether it's Autism Speaks, Autism Society of America, UM-CARD, we're all one big family working together for the benefit of our families.
Right. Question number 4. What's one real-world change in Florida you've seen happen because of your work with Autism Speaks?
Not just my work with Autism Speaks, but we were just talking offline about the new spectrum law. The spectrum alert law just went into effect last
Kind of
week.
like an Amber Alert, right?
It's just like an Amber Alert. It's going to be, there's 1 year to get this all in place, but the spectrum alert law goes into effect officially next July 2026. All law enforcement will be trained on autism spectrum disorder behaviors, etc., and there will be an alert system to let us know if anyone goes missing.
That's so heartening. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, last question is, finish this sentence. Autism Speaks matters because?
For me, it matters because it is my heart and soul. It is an organization that will always be there. It was founded on the principles of being there to hold your hand through this diagnosis and through every stage of the lifespan, and they always will be.
Thank you. And I've had people like you and other organizations like Michael Alessandri at CARD hold my hand, and I'm eternally grateful. You guys have just been awesome to myself, my daughter, and my entire family.
Thank you. And we're excited to welcome you to our Autism Speaks Executive Leadership Council here in South Florida.
Thanks so much. Candi, let's turn to the camera. This has been the Autism Podcast.